as well as some from Australia, from Chile, and other sources like New Zealand and Denmark. Those are the main sources of queens. I'm not talking about the New Zealand package, just the New Zealand queens. We also produce some queens in Canada. Some beekeepers will produce their own queens. There's some producers that will sell queens as part of their operation, but mainly we rely on importation of queens. On the other hand, when beekeepers are asked in their annual survey about colony losses, in the winter survey that they fill out there, they were asked to rank what are the main possible reasons for colony losses. And as you can see here, most of the provinces in Canada, they mention poor queen as one of the possibilities for their colony losses. So we do need a lot of queens, but beekeepers have been telling us that the queens are not performing as good, or they don't last as long as they used to in the test. So talking about the poor queen, so what we consider a poor queen is those queens that will be prematurely replaced, that will become drone layers, that will produce a brood pattern that is patchy, so it's not a good pattern, and they are susceptible to diseases. So have that in mind, and that concern for beekeepers, we decide to test queens when we import queens. When they arrived, if they, at least how much sperm and sperm viability and pathogens those queens may have. So we tested queens produced in Canada and also queens that we import. So as you see here, the little cages that we import, depending on the source, there we have the plastic cage or the wooden cage. So in this experiment, we bought some queens as any other beekeeper, and sometimes we will buy in the same lot that the other beekeepers will get their queens. So there's no special treatment, for research purpose in those queens. So we import as the same as beekeepers, and we analyzed those queens as they arrived. So they were not banked; they were analyzed right away for sperm count, sperm viability, and we also test for some pathogens. For nosema, and it was good that was mentioned before, so nosema, some trypanosoma like Cryptidia, and viruses. So some of the sources of queens that we tested, so from Canada we tested from queens produced in 5 different provinces, from Alberta, British Columbia, Saskatchewan, Ontario, and Quebec. And the imported source, basically the main sources that we get queens from California, Hawaii, Australia, Chile, and New Zealand. In total, from 2014 to 2017, we analyzed almost 350 queens. And here, just to show, so those are the provinces that have the star there, where we get queens from, and they were all shipped using our local postal services. So there is some transportation as well inside there to get in our lab. And that red dot is where our lab is, so all the queens were shipped, and we have data logs with temperature to monitor the temperature if there's any peaks in the temperatures. And the imported one, we rely on information that the co-op or the brokers provide us to see if there was any change in temperatures during transportation. So basically, and talking about sperm count and sperm viability, we extracted, so we dissect the queens for the spermatheca, and we check the sperm. We prepare the sperm and we dye with 2 different dyes for live sperm and dead sperm. So in green, live, and red, the sperm that is dead. And with that, so we count. So we check how much sperm that spermatheca was storing. And as you can see here, so the number of sperm, the count in millions. So we see the graphs for the imported and local, so those combining all the sources, local and imported. They are very similar, almost the same graph there. So the amount of sperm was very similar between the local and the imported, having the mean there basically around 6 million sperm stored, but as you can see, some had below the 2 million and the maximum there 10 million sperm. So why is it important to have the sperm count? So we know that to produce workers, the queen will have to fertilize the eggs, so you need to have enough sperm there. And we consider poor queens or poor mated queens when they have less than 3 million sperm in spermatheca. But that will not, that queen will not be able to have a commercial honey production operation for a season. So expect the queen, a new queen, to have more than that. But when we check for sperm viability, so we have the local and the imported stock. So as you see, in terms of mean, they are around 90% viable sperm. But in the imported sources, we see a huge variation. So we see that there are very good queens, but you see several queens that have less than 60% of the sperm viable in the spermatheca. So that we notice in the imported one. And why? So the reasons could be conditions during transportation. So we know there was studies done by Jeff Pettis in the US and Dr. Martha Warner in Canada, where they exposed queens to different conditions. So low temperatures below 8 degrees Celsius and temperature as high as 42 degrees. And they saw that there was an effect in the sperm viability. So it could be during the transportation. We know queens that come from other countries, they have a long way to get in Canada here, and transportation in the cargo area, the conditions there are not that well, there's no standards. Also chemical exposures, so that could be another factor. If the queens there was a study showing that there is an effect in sperm viability if they were exposed to a certain chemicals as well. But in this study, we didn't test what was the effect, so we just stated what we found here at the sperm viability. We also, as a part of our study, some of the queens we analyzed as they arrived, as the data that I showed, but also some queens we installed in hives and followed them. And we noticed that at the end of the season in the fall, some of the colonies that were weak, and we thought that they may not make it through the winter, we removed those queens and we analyzed, and as you see here, the weak colonies, we also noticed the sperm viability for those weak colonies in the queen there was less than 60%, most of them, 60% viable sperm. But we also sacrificed some queens that at the end of the season, they look healthy, and as you can see, there's a big difference there. So the queens that they look very healthy at the end of the season in the fall, they have a high sperm viability. We also noticed that the queens that had low sperm viability, the weak colonies, the queens had, we detected several viruses in those queens compared to the healthy ones. Being the most common there, deformed wing and sac brood. So my take here, if you have a weak colony in the fall, don't try to overwinter that colony. They may survive at the winter, but in the fall there, they're not going to have the spring build up that you're planning. And it's just gonna probably deceive you at the end with it's not gonna be, we're gonna have winter losses, and you might expect it that, a miracle may happen after the winter, they'll get better, but probably that's not the case. We also checked, when you buy queens, that's what you want the queen, but the queen comes in those cages with attendants, and so we decide to test as well what you buy in those cages. So you buy the queen, sometimes with a good sperm viability, a good sperm count, but we also to test what else you're buying in that cage. So we analyzed the attendants in those cages, and we found that local and imported queens that we tested, some attendants, or a lot of the attendants, more than 67% of the attendants, were infected with Nosema cerami. And some of them, they have a very high load of spores of Nosema cerami. That's comparable to experiments where we actively infect bees with spores. They have the same level there. But surprisingly, the queens in the cage detect this other pathogen here. So here we have it's a trypanosoma, as Orlando mentioned before. So we test there. In another study, we see there in terms of glomerulopathic species. Viruses, so the queens, we test the queens for virus, we test for 7 viruses. We detect the black queen cell, 55% of the queens had more than one virus there. And deformed wing was also detected in the sperm. So we tested the sperm for viruses, and deformed wing we also detected in the sperm. So as just a message, so improving recommendations, I think we should have an improvement in the transportation conditions. So we know we have standards and established. We know that we sometimes get peaks of cold or hot temperatures, mostly cold temperatures. From the time that the queens are caged from the sources, they transported until the beekeeper installed them in the hives. We know sometimes our spring in Canada, we have very cold days, but I think beekeepers do a good job in keeping the queens in a certain temperature. They're not going to install the queens when it's too cold there, but the transportation sometimes is something that we don't know what is happening during that time. Also, as I mentioned, to not overwinter weak hives, because we noticed that a lot of them have problems or sperm viability or pathogens in the queen, so that queen, even if survive over the winter, during the spring build up, you may have problems. And also recaging. So when you import queens and it comes with attendants, is a recommendation in most provinces is to not install those attendants with the queens. So we remove those attendants and destroy the attendants. So you mitigate that risk of introducing some diseases that we may know or may not know and may be new to Canada. And that's what I have. I just want to say thank you to all the group that was working with me at the time in this project and our funders. Thank you.
It would be really helpful for a follow-up study to be specific as to the origin of the queens, especially the weak queens. Right now in Canada, we buy queens from many different offshore places and continental places. But to say only that imported queens are generally weaker doesn't provide any assurance to the beekeeper who's buying those queens as to where we should look for strong queens.
Yeah, and before, in the beginning of the study, I was separating by sources. Sometimes it gave me, put me in a lot of trouble if you have a producer from New Zealand or from other countries, Kona or US. But what we notice is sometimes there's years where one source, we notice that source will have problems in their batch. So it's not specific. Every year we will have queens with poor sperm viability from that source all year, every single year after that. Some years we have, we had some years that we had problems with queens from Chile, other years that we had problems with queens from California. So it's not, I cannot say that, those are the worst, but we notice overall as imported, that's how they perform. We notice that variation in the sperm viability from the imported. But it's not saying that it's just those that had low sperm viability, they were not all from the same source. It varies from year to year.
Great. That's right, we only have time for that one question.
You guys can meet me at the booth if you have more questions.
Great talk, thank you.